Good evening, Austin. My name is Roxanne Evans, and I'm with AISD for All. AISD for All is a diverse coalition of parents, educators, and community leaders working to promote equity and social justice within the Austin Independent School District. Our goal is to amplify the voices of all students, families, and educators within AISD and to shine a light on issues facing the district's historically marginalized communities. We seek to engage the broader community on these topics, encourage informed voting in school board elections, and advocate for a strong public education for all our students. We are conducting these candidate forums, and tonight we have the District 8 at-large forum candidates with us. We're conducting these candidates forums so community members can get to know candidates better and understand their position on issues of importance to all of us. After the live broadcast, you can view all of the candidate forums we've held and clips of each question and sets of answers at our website, aisdforall.org/voter guide, or on our Facebook page at facebook.com/AISDforall/videos. Now we have a public service announcement from Laura Yeager. Laura?
Thank you, Roxanne. I've never been called a public service announcement before. So I'm just going to talk a teeny bit about voting and why school board elections are important. People definitely get excited to vote in presidential elections. And while Texas is generally among the last states in voter turnout, I mean, more people do turn out in presidential elections, but they don't often do their research and learn about school board candidates, and they come at the very, very bottom of the ballot. And it's going to be a long ballot this year, and there is not straight ticket voting, at least as of today. Changes often, but so we're doing these forums to help people understand. You know, what's interesting is school board candidates and basically locally elected officials are the ones that are closest to you, that have the most impact on you, and you often have the most impact on them. So, you know, the school boards, I'm going to just read what TASB, which is the Texas Association of School Boards, how they define what a school board does. They are elected from their communities to make decisions about the educational programs based on community needs, values, and expectations, and they are entrusted by the public to translate the needs of students into policies, plans, and goals that are supported by our community. So our schools are the heart and soul of our communities, and so it's super important who we pick to put on our school board. I'm going to read just a few things, that the list of what the school board does, because often people don't know. They hire and fire superintendents. They set goals for the superintendent. They vote on and approve district policies, including priorities, programs, curriculum. They determine how funding is distributed within the district. They put bonds that address school buildings and infrastructure up for election. They set the tax rate for school property taxes. They pass the school budget consistent with how they've defined the vision of the district. They make final decisions on firing of teachers. They advocate for the district. They're supposed to anyway, they don't always. And they communicate the district's vision and the success to the community. And again, all of this is within the framework of the state and federal policies, which have impact on education policy as well. But there is a lot of leeway that our school boards have to do things. The way AISD works, and every district's a little bit different. There are 4-year terms. There are 9 board members, and they are staggered. This year, there are 4 spots up for election. There overall are 2 at-large representatives, and this is 1. So everyone in AISD, which is I think about 400,000 people, can vote on this spot. It's almost like running for mayor. And then there's 7 single district trustees, and you get to vote on that as well. So everyone gets 2 at-large and 1 single district. If you want to figure out which single district you're in, you know, we can put that up in the chat. It's austinisd.org/board/boundaries, and there's a map. But it's really important to pay attention to this at-large position and all of them, because once they're on the board, they vote for everything that affects you. And so what I'm just going to say as a public education advocate, it's really important to research the candidates, to vote, and then to stay in touch with them, be a resource to them on things that you think are important, and then call them when you need them, because they're your representatives. So the last thing I'll mention is just a few key dates. Monday is the last day to register to vote. Check your registration. make sure it's up to date, because if you don't have it in by Monday, you can't vote. And then early voting is starting October 13th, and it goes to the 30th, and then election day is November 3rd. So thank you guys for being here and learning about your candidates, and thanks for letting me put in a little reminder for everybody to vote. So thank you all. Good luck.
Thank you very much, Laura. Now, we will go over some ground rules we have this evening. And we've just got a couple of very basic rules for our forum. First, we ask that all of the candidates respond directly to the subject in the question asked and direct your answers to the moderator and to our viewers. Second, we ask that you please do not interrupt fellow candidates, and please speak only during your allotted time, and to respect the timekeeper's efforts to keep us on track. And logistically, the way it'll work, you'll each be given 1 minute to introduce yourselves and tell us why you're running. And then I'll begin asking a series of 6 to 8 questions, depending on time, and each candidate will be given 90 seconds to respond to each question, and we'll rotate the order in which the candidates respond. I may ask a follow-up question for each of the candidates in question. They'll have 1 minute to respond to the follow-up. And if there's anything you would like to add, please raise your hand and we'll allow you an additional 20 seconds to make your point in response. And again, the timekeeper will inform you when you have 30 seconds left and when your time has ended. And so now we will move on, and we will begin by asking each of the candidates in 1 minute or less to introduce yourselves and why you are running. And for this question, we're going to begin our questioning with Noelita Lugo.
Buenas noches, me llamo Noelita Lugo, soy otomí y mexicana y quiero servir en la mesa directiva del Distrito Escolar de Austin porque yo quiero ver que todos los niños tengan una oportunidad de sobresalir en la clase y en la vida. My name is Noelita Lugo. I'm an Indigenous Latina. I'm running for school board because I want every child to have access to real success in the classroom and in life. I grew up in Houston. I came to Austin 25 years ago to attend UT. 30 seconds, Lord have mercy. Okay, I invite people to find out more about me by visiting my website, noelita4aisd.com. I've got the professional skills to bring to the school board, the advocacy skills to bring to the school board. I just earned the Austin Chronicle endorsement earlier today, as well as the endorsement of other local Democratic and Union Labor Council groups here in Austin, as well as the support of city, county, and state elected officials.
Thank you, Noelita. We will next go to Jared Breckenridge.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Jared Brackenridge. Few things about me, I guess. I only have a minute, but my name is Jared Breckenridge, and I'm an Austinite. Grew up here all my life, and basically I attended all AISD schools. I now serve in multiple schools as a substitute teacher, and now as a student teacher at Barbara Jordan Elementary School. And so just having those experiences inside of those classrooms, knowing that our students' needs are not being met, that's what ultimately prompted me to run for the school board. In addition to that, I've attended every regular board meeting for the past few years, and just getting to see the systemic inequities that are happening on our school board and the processes that we're following, not knowing that how detrimental those decisions are. So in addition to that, I'll just say, go ahead and visit my website. You can see all of my endorsements and things like that. So thank you.
Thank you, Jared. And next we'll go to Leticia Caballero.
Thank you, Roxanne, and thank you all for hosting this forum this evening. My name is Leticia Moreno Caballero. I am born and raised Austin, Texas. I graduated from Austin ISD schools. I am a parent of a graduate of an AISD school, and I've got 2 other students at AISD schools. I have a long record of volunteerism and experience with the district on campus level, elementary school level, middle school level, district-wide level. I worked with Roxanne Evans and 18 other members to create the billion bond that was passed by 72% of voters in 2017. And I also serve as vice chair of the Austin Ed Fund, which is a foundation that fundraises to give monies right back to the classrooms and opportunities to our students. Thank you for having me, and I hope you can learn more about me and my candidacy on my website. Thank you.
Thank you, Leticia. And now we'll go to Mike Herschenfeld.
Great, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Mike Herschenfeld. I'm running for the District 8 seat, the at-large seat on the Austin ISD Board of Trustees. I've spent the past 12 years as a passionate educator, really focused on progress through systemic change. And I'm running for Austin ISD Board of Trustees, to be honest, because I'm tired of watching our leaders continue to focus on surface level symptoms of what I see as deeper problems with Band-Aids and duct tape, while disregarding the fact that the foundation they're working from is, and in my opinion, has been broken. I've personally served as a high school social studies teacher, where teaching world history and psychology before being able to become a central office administrator, where I managed a district-wide system of school autonomy, strategic school planning, and most importantly, was able to direct the launch of a really innovative new preschool expansion focused on supporting our families with the most need. And all of these roles require daily interaction and collaboration with principals, teachers, directors, families, and members of the community. And so I understand the progress AISD can make when this work is done well and prioritized. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And now we'll go to our first question. And our first question is basically, what, in your opinion, are the biggest challenges facing AISD today? And for this round of questioning, we'll begin with you, Mike.
Great. I just took myself off mute. I should have just stayed. No, I appreciate that question. And in no particular order, I'm going to start with community trust. And I feel like this is something that all of the candidates and myself have spoken about, in the sense that we're not going to be able to get anything done well, effectively, or sustainably without rebuilding that trust. And I think it is, at this point now, lacking almost across the entire district. Part of that stems from the fact that it's very difficult for citizens to comment to the board, to reach out, to access the administration. I think we're seeing now that there are, even during the COVID crisis, some similar but loud and effective voices are the ones that are penetrating through to the administration and to the board. And it's leaving a large cross-section of our district kind of left to figure things out for themselves. And so what I would like to do to address that is, one, I think we need to reduce the amount of time that the board spends in executive session. I think we need to leverage the district smartphone application to be able to provide real-time interaction with the community, because that smartphone app would be able to be translated into every possible language that we have across the district. And we just need to continue to think outside the box for how we can bring people into the district and not force them to have to get the district to listen to them. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Noelita, let us hear from you about the biggest challenges facing AISD.
Thank you for the question. So yes, I would boil it down to three main issues. First, adequate public education funding, being able to provide a strategic, sound, planned legislative advocacy approach, especially as we near the legislative session of 2021. Right now, my understanding is that we have one person assigned to legislative matters. A district of our size really needs to have at least, a team or a group that is dedicated to that type of strategic advocacy work. The second thing would be strengthening our special education, improving services and treatment of special education, not from the standpoint of, how do we provide units and how do we segregate students based on learning abilities or exceptionalities, but looking at how we provide more inclusive instruction. And the third thing would be responding to the ripple effects of COVID that we will likely see for the foreseeable future. Not only basing reopenings on public health data, continuing to enhance online instruction, providing safe in-person instruction for students most in need, but also developing plans to bring students hopefully back up to grade level, or doing our best to provide SEL and kind of remediation or intervention as students do eventually come back to full face-to-face instruction.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Jared.
Great question, Ms. Evans. So for me, I would say that one of the most pressing issues that we're facing in AISD is our enrollment, basically. So basically, our enrollment issues are what's toggling a lot of things, such as our school funding. It all ties back to basically our enrollment. When we don't have our students in our classrooms, that's when we're losing that funding that provides that access to programs, to better funded programs and things like that. We know that many of the resources that we don't have, comes from that as well. In addition to that, I mean, equity, we have a chief equity officer now. However, getting that office staffed up, it has been a battle, and Dr. Stephanie Holly has definitely done what she can within her circumstances. So I'm excited to see how much more she's gonna do as we get this equity plan put together and get it off, get it off the ground and get it started. So those are the few issues. So like I said, equity, school funding, enrollment, of course, our academic performance for all of our students. As we all know, not all of our students are performing and haven't been performing at the same level for decades. So these are the issues that I look forward to helping to tackle.
Thank you, Jared. Leticia?
Thank you, Roxanne. I'm going to echo a lot of the comments you've already heard. I will say short-term immediate is how do we educate our students safely right now during COVID? Our families are stressed, our students are stressed, our teachers are very stressed about what in-person will look like. How do we do remote learning and in-person at the same time? What are those safety protocols that are going to be in place? And so short term is, what does next week look like? What does the rest of the semester look like? Making sure that is communicated well and everybody is working together when we all are working together to the same goal. Long-term COVID, what are our long-term impacts? What kind of academic losses happened? What sort of, it was said earlier, social emotional needs are going to be there, mental health issues that are going to come of this, learning loss of 6 months of isolation that our students have been in. Then there's, again, community trust that has been broken all over the place. And of course, declining enrollment, that's been something that's been an issue since 2013 and continues to be an issue. The legislature continues to underfund public ed. That's not going to change. Even if the House flips blue, we'll still have a Republican-led Senate and a Republican administration and a budget deficit, a state budget deficit. So how the district handles those budget stresses is going to be really important going into the next school year. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next question has to do with equity and school reopening. And Leticia, we're going to begin this one with you. And the question is, as we know, AISD is a divided and inequitable district, despite our claims otherwise. Some AISD campuses enjoy disproportionate advantages, due in part to some having wealthy, well-connected parents who can bring significant outside resources to their schools and thus often have a disproportionate voice in district decisions. As an at-large trustee, what would you do to knit the district back together and ensure equitable treatment of students and campuses, and at the same time empower families across the district as schools reopen safely?
So there are 2 questions. How would I lift up the voices of the students that are inequitably served? So you do that by authentically engaging with those campuses and making sure they're aware of the services that they're entitled to, what services are happening on the other side of town, what is happening, not happening at their school that could be happening at their school, and try to solve that. Is it a principal problem? Is it a resource issue? And that's how you can start doing that campus by campus or community by community. I don't think there's a silver bullet. It's going to take all of us working together to kind of find that, find where that is, that inequitable, where it is and how do we make that equitable. And that's an ongoing thing. Having been listened to Dr. Holly, which has been fantastic. It's not, one and done and then we're fixed and then we move on. It's something that's a constant ongoing piece that's going to have to be involved in all of the work that we do, whether it's academic planning, budget planning, program planning, bond planning, and I missed the second part of your question and my time's up. So
Okay, that's quite all right. You got most of what we needed. Next, we'll go to Mike.
Yes, thank you. So, I mean, first and foremost, I think we all agree that a comprehensive, detailed equity audit is absolutely necessary in the district to really dive into all of the codified policies and procedures that exist. But what I'm starting to see happening, and I don't want to see continue happening, is that the idea of that equity audit happening, stopping the district from doing anything right now. There are plenty of things that we can be doing right now that we don't need a detailed equity audit plan to tell us that there are problems. And so for me, there are really three things that I think the district needs to address to kind of start working towards correcting these equity issues. One of them is how we do school enrollment. I believe that our school boundaries actively maintain that 1928 city master plan that overtly segregated the district. And since then, we have kept students kind of zoned to schools that are overly segregated. In addition to that, we have to address our how we fund our individual schools within the district, not the money we get from the state, but the money that we have here in the district. So right now we fund our schools with a staffing allocation, but that doesn't necessarily represent student needs. So I'm a proponent of a student-based budgeting system where funding is appropriated to schools based on weighted student needs. It makes it a much more transparent system that we can actually follow the funds. In addition to that, I believe we need to engage in a community-led school redesign process that takes place cyclically and that can move throughout the district, and that we can actually give communities a voice that they have never had before. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we will go to Jared.
I'm sorry, Ms. Evans, if you don't mind, can you please repeat that question?
Certainly. AISD is a very divided and inequitable district despite our claims otherwise. Some AISD campuses enjoy disproportionate advantages due to wealthy, well-connected parents who can bring significant outside resources to their schools and thus often have a disproportionate voice in district decisions. As an at-large trustee, what would you do to knit the district back together and ensure equitable treatment of students and campuses and empower families across the district as schools reopen?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, Ms. Evans, I've actually began doing that already. You know, it's about uplifting the voices that have oftentimes been silenced. So most of the time, that's our students of color, that is our families of color, that is our special education, our dual language, our students, the ones that we are ultimately here to serve, and basically even our low socioeconomic families and things like that. So those are I guess groups of people that I specifically will be targeting. I want to hear those inputs of those people. Since I've been an advocate for our public school system in AISD, I have ultimately done that. Oftentimes when the school closures plans was going through, I was there and I heard these students, 6 years old, saying, please do not close my school. And so when I heard that, I was the main one in the crowd yelling, please listen to the students, you know, and it's those kind of trustees that we need on the school board ultimately that are uplifting those voices that don't feel respected. In addition to that, you know, the equity audit that we're working hard to get, we've been working hard to get, I think that if done with an outside view will be the ultimate, you know, success for our district. It's gonna put the microscope on it all to explore the inequities that we've been facing. And I just can't wait to see that happen in a true and authentic way. In addition to that, of course, it's the procedures that we follow on the board, such as allowing more than 1 minute for our families and our staff members to speak.
Thank you. Noelita?
All right, so thank you for the question, and thank you for repeating it again. So I would say, you know, improving equity district-wide, not only fully funding and fully staffing the equity office, but also establishing the expectation that our district will have a stable chief equity officer, which requires a contract of at least 2 to 3 years. The other thing would be, of course, to procure an independent, comprehensive district-wide equity assessment, and then from there implement actionable recommendations. I also think we really need to go in terms of like knitting the community back together. We need to go where families are, working with trusted community organizations, with churches, with other areas where families are already there, thinking of how else we might be able to reach folks where they are, not having a all, but really a no wrong door type of approach. And then I would say, listening to understand that that's the role of district executives, of district staff and campus leaders, as well as the board members, and not demanding that marginalized communities speak with deference, because that has, I think some of us, especially Jared and I, who've been at board meetings, we've seen that again, but the expectation is that we fit sort of mold, but it's the public official's job to listen, regardless of whatever the static may be, listen to the message, look for that, and then work together, because we are public servants. And so I think I would bring those suggestions to the board.
Okay, thank you. And before we leave this topic, I have a follow-up question for all of you. When you're on the board, when you're on the dais, maybe 6 months from now or a year from now, and you're listening to a superintendent's report, how will you know that schools reopened with equity? Starting with you, Noelita.
So how will I know that schools, as if they happened in the past? Gosh, I would look first at data, right? Like which campuses did we reopen? How many students and teachers were infected with COVID? I mean, this to me, I struggle to answer it because it sounds really morbid to think about us reopening unsafely. And that's what I'm afraid of, is that we're heading into a reopening situation based on vagaries of political winds bending to capitalist interests rather than sound scientific public health data. And so I do struggle with that, but I would look at data and look at how did reopening impact our least advantaged students compared to our most advantaged students, but that should be happening now.
Thank you. Jared, same question.
Well, as for me, I currently, like I said, I'm working on campus. So the thing that I'm looking for six months from now, a year from now, is if we open as is right now, which students are going to be directly impacted? Is it going to be our Hispanic and our African Americans? Are they going to be the most highly impacted by COVID-19 as we reopen these campuses? If so, then we know that we have failed them equitably again. In addition to that, allowing our staff and our students to have choices, not forcing them back into campuses, not saying it's either this or that, because there's multiple options that should be allotted to our families and our staff members. So those are the top 2 things off the top of my head. Thank you.
Thank you. Leticia, what would an equitable school reopening look like for you?
Well, if we're looking 6 months later, we need to, disaggregate the data. What happened? If equity is getting our students what they need to perform well or serve their needs, did that happen? Did we do it? How was it done? Was it done well at this campus versus that campus? So that kind of data and analysis and output needs to be part of the report 6 months later. It is, again, like I mentioned earlier, highly stressful for many involved. And it's not, again, to use a word that was mentioned on Monday night, monolithic. It's not all what this population wants this or that population wants that. It is all over the board on how people are impacted by COVID. And so if you're going to do a review in 6 months, it has to have some disaggregated data and seeing how we performed in serving all of our students and teachers and AISD family.
Thank you. Mike, same question.
Yeah, I think for me, what it looks like is how did we utilize our resources equitably during that time? And how did we prioritize support to students and families? And so in an equitable way, I would want to see that the district prioritized families and students with the most need, which are also our historically marginalized families within the city. And so that should be happening right now. I mean, we're looking at how technology issues were handled over the summer. And at one point there were still like 10,000 families without access to internet. Those things aren't going to go away. We need to keep making sure there are going to be families who talk louder over other families. There are going to be sides of town that are have access to people easier than others. We need to push all of that out of the way and say, are we actually meeting the needs of our families that have those needs first? And that's really what it comes down to. There are going to be some people who need to get their needs met first. And that some people will get those needs met later.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next topic is going to be around school closures. As we all know, Austin ISD recently closed 4 campuses permanently, and as many as 8 more campuses were discussed as possible closures at a later date. What have you learned about the school closures during this most recent process, and how would you approach future decisions regarding school closures once you're a trustee? And we'd like to begin this round of questioning with Jared.
Awesome. So yes, this is another big reason why I decided to run for the school board, because I know, and prior to this past set of school closures, I knew which one of our schools would be ultimately impacted, and I knew it would happen in our District 1 and our District 2 mostly. And so, as you stated, basically the other 8 schools, they're coming, whether we're ready or not, they're coming, and it's very important that we make sure that we do not disrupt school communities. It's also important that we make sure that we explore other options before we choose just to close down schools. There were so many other options that we could have explored, but I feel like our district took the easy route out. And so as a school board trustee, you would have me on there basically saying, number 1, we're gonna put a cap on how many schools we can close in one part of our district. In addition to that, we're gonna explore more options. We're not just gonna go for the easy route out. And then last but not least, we're also going to put a cap on, I guess, demographics of students. And then, of course, making a more transparent process. I think most of our families and our staff members and all of that would have accepted this plan had it been more transparent and done in collaboration. And I think that if we move along and say, for instance, that is the last thing, if we do it in that kind of way, you might have a little bit more buy-in, but as for me, if there's any inequities, it'd be a solid no.
Okay, same question, Leticia.
Thank you, Roxanne. What we saw with these closures is this process was not transparent. There was not engagement, and it was very, very painful for many families and staff. And so going into the future, I think we've got to let communities know, neighborhoods know, schools know what the conversation is and why, and look for alternatives. I think the best thinking comes from our communities when we engage them and share with them, here's the challenge, here's what we're facing, what solution, let's problem solve how we fix this, what can we do. If it's a budget issue, if it's a declining enrollment issue, let's address that. Let's find out why that's happening, and let's do that instead of going towards the closure route. This conversation is not going to go away. We know we're going to have budget stresses, and so we've got to start engaging the communities now, or as soon as we're back fully in person, so we can start kind of gaining some of that best thinking on what we can do moving forward so that we don't have to go down this road of closures.
Thank you. Mike, same question?
Yeah, thank you. I agree with Leticia in the process that was engaged was flawed from day one. It didn't create a scenario where people knew what was going to happen. There's no reason that a district can't have a set of guidelines for when a new school is built or when a school is closed and exactly how that works there. And I think that addresses a lot of what Jared was talking about, in the sense that we can't over address one community in town. And so for me, I served on the district's boundary advisory committee during the time of the school closures. And what I truly felt like what was happening was that committee was in a room talking about which wealthy families were going to get access to a new Southwest Elementary School, while at the exact same time in a different room, a different group of people were talking about which schools on the east side of town were going to be closed. And we weren't allowed to talk to each other. And this is one of the reasons that I decided to run for the board. I felt like this boundary process in itself was overt systemic segregation. It's why I talk about the need to eliminate boundaries over time, because they will continue to serve to segregate the district. At the time of the school closures, we had many campuses in the district that were at almost 130% capacity. And so if we actually looked at that district-wide and not just in little silos across town, I don't know that we would have had to close 4 schools. Maybe we still would have, but we need to look at every possible option before coming to closure. That has to be the last thing chosen. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And last, Noelita.
Thank you for this question. So yeah, I absolutely agree. We must never repeat the bungled school closure process of 2019, which seemed to have the district paying more attention to PRing its way out of the problem using Arrow at work, rather than treating students, caregivers, parents, teachers as real partners in the process. So a specific example would be, instead of inviting busy parents and caregivers to a facilities master plan, why not say designing a plan to replace older campuses, right? Simple, straightforward language. Instead of school changes and modernization, how about preparing for school closures and consolidations? As I mentioned earlier, really listening first to understand, and understanding that our board members are public servants first and foremost. As a public servant myself, I've had to confront situations where parents and community members have felt stressed and upset and angry, and I treat them with respect and I treat them with empathy. That's what I think we should have seen from AISD. One last thing, and I'm going to squeeze this in, for anyone who was serving on an AISD advisory body during school closures and saw the plan's inequity, we could have really used you by our side. Jared and I were there with many others.
Okay, thank you. And I've got a follow-up question before we get off this topic. A couple of you have mentioned school boundaries, so I have a 2-part question. First, I'm told that the Boundary Advisory Committee has disbanded. Now, the makeup of the Boundary Advisory Committee, those people were appointed by district administration. So I'd like to know if you as a trustee would favor having trustee appointees to a Boundary Advisory Committee. And a second part of that question is, how would you feel about totally doing away with boundaries, having all schools in the district be schools of choice? And we'll start with you, Noelita.
Yes, so I absolutely agree. Thank you, Roxanne, for the question. I absolutely agree that we need to completely revamp and redesign how these advisory bodies and advisory committees are formed. At first blush, it might sound more equitable to have trustees assign folks to these bodies, but I think we need to have additional guardrails in place to really ensure that we're bringing forth the voices of, especially the voices of those folks who will be directly impacted by some of the choices that often are carried as a burden by Black and Hispanic and special education families and students. In terms of the other question, doing away with boundaries entirely and having a full choice district, what I worry with that is, again, we may see that because there are these perceptions about what good schools mean, families who can will transfer to campuses that appear to be a campus that would meet their needs. So again, I really would like for the board and the district community to identify what is the best way for our district to really invest in all of our campuses, to bring all of our campuses up so that families are more likely to opt in to the campus that's closest to them.
Okay, thank you. Mike, same question.
Sorry, could you, I know there were 2 parts. Could you repeat that?
Yes, the first part had to do with if you would be in favor of a revamped Boundary Advisory Committee with the members being appointed by board members as opposed to the administration, and what your thoughts would be on totally eliminating boundaries in the district and having all schools being schools of choice.
Yeah. Oh, I'm getting some feedback. On the first part of that question, I'm not, when I got on the committee, I filled out a form on the district's website and somebody said, do you want to be on the committee? I literally have no idea who selected me for it. And I agree with Noelita that I don't know that just like changing up who makes that choice would have much of an effect. But the answer to the second question, I think, would translate into not having the need for a boundary advisory committee, because I do believe that AISD can be a district-wide district that has all choice. And with that, we have to also understand that when this has been done in other places across the country, the district would become more segregated. Every single place that this has occurred, people choose to self-segregate. And so you have to put guardrails on the enrollment system, and those guardrails have to be designed with the community. So I can give some examples of them, but I'm not proposing these. And so, you know, you could say that every school, 30% of every seat has to be held for the bottom 25% of family income students. You could say that if you live within 0.5 miles of a school, you get first access to that school. If you live, or if you have a sibling already enrolled, you get next access. These are things that I'm not proposing, but the district, the community should design. I do also want to say that, you know, there are other candidates, as well as the president of the teachers union, that sends their children to a school that's not nearest to their home. And so we do have choice in this district, but it's just not for everybody. It's for those that know how to leverage.
Okay, thank you. Leticia?
Thank you, Roxanne. I do believe we need a boundary advisory committee. I was disappointed that it was disbanded. That committee should be actively looking at boundaries and enrollment and growth and neighborhood and decline and all the things that we've already talked about and touched on. I believe a better group would be a trustee appointed. My experience with trustees is that they will find the people, the active school people in their districts that are interested in public schools and making sure that they are equitable and represent the district. And so I think that is a fairer way than filling out something on the website and getting called and said, congratulations, you get to be on this committee. You've got to have people that have a willingness, a want to learn more and understand more than just their little part of the world, but understand how it all fits together as one AISD. On, you know, making it a full choice district, I'm not sure I've got all the facts on how that would work. I know that, you know, we've got vertical teams and teaching and learning that go up and down vertical teams and all of those different academic, you know, pieces that are tied together. And so I would have to do more thinking and learning on that other approach. We are a diverse district. We do have choice schools. We do have neighborhood schools. And I think that's one of the things that makes AISD great, is that we are this diverse district that has all of those things for people.
Thank you. And Jared?
Awesome. So as for me, I would say it's great privilege for someone to be in our district for only 4 years and get an invite to actually join committees that we, you know, many of us, I know of a grandmother that have applied several times to be on these committees, advisory boards and things like that, and has been denied. I know myself, you know, being a former AISD student, an employee of the district, have applied to these positions and have not had that opportunity to speak for the students that I serve. I know that Noelita, in addition, has not had that opportunity to serve on these advisory boards and things like that. I know that if I were on one of those boards, I'd be advocating forcefully and hard against these inequities that we already facing. So it's things like that, especially if we're like the chair of a subcommittee or things like that. It's those opportunities where you have the chance to prove yourself and to say that this is the way that the district should be moving, and this is how we should make sure that we're addressing the needs of the most marginalized populations. In addition to your last question, so basically about our boundaries, I think that nothing should be done to our communities. I think that it should be done with our communities. And so we shouldn't have plans pre-designed in our minds and things like that. We have to come to the table together with the community, and we have to decide what's best for everyone. I feel like we need to have more of boundaries, but we should have open enrollment. But that's just one possibility. We have to explore this, and we need to have authentic conversations and listen to the needs of the parents and the students.
Okay, thank you. And Mike, you had one thing you wanted to add briefly?
Yeah, no, just since I felt like I was directed to there, I just want to make it clear, all I did was fill out a form. I don't know who chose me. So I agree, maybe the process is wrong, but I just want to address that and the fact that I did vote no on the final boundaries because of all of that. And so I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. The next issue we're going to talk about is campaign finance. In the 2016 AISD election, there were 3 single largest campaign contributions totaling approximately $45,000 that came into the at-large race from owners and promoters of charter schools. And so the question is, have you accepted or would you accept donations from individuals who are known to support or have financial interest in charter schools, or from political action committees that have bundled their donations? And a second part of that is, do you see any kind of contradiction about the largest donations entering the AISD race from charter school supporters? And I'd like to begin that question starting with Noelita.
All right, thank you, Roxanne. Y'all's questions are deep. They're so long. So, oh, good, that's in the chat. All right, I'm sorry. My answer will be really short. So no, I will not accept funds from pro charter or any kind of charter PAC or individual. Largest donation to enter from charter school supporters. What was the other question? Yes, I do see something discordant about the largest donations entering these school board races from pro-charter schools. It doesn't feel right. Like, we should have an ethical compass that says, hey, warning, warning. So it doesn't feel right.
Thank you. Jared, same question.
So as for me, here in a few days, I believe most people will have the access to see who has received these type of donations and things like that. For me, no, absolutely not. I will not, because ultimately we have to think about how that impacts our school system. And then also, it's about, you know, making sure that every candidate has an equal opportunity to succeed, no matter, you know, despite the special interest groups and things like that. So I hope I answered your question as best as I could.
You did. Thank you, Jared. Leticia?
Thank you, Roxanne. I have not received any charter money. I am aware of those news articles that had eye-popping money coming in those other races several years ago. It is expensive to try to get your name out, and I see Noelita, Mike, and Jared more often than I do my own family these nights. We are all Zooming all the time, trying to do our level best to talk to the community any way we can, on the phone, via Zoom, on chat, because we're all love public schools. We're all doing this because we want to better our public school system. We all believe in the district. We believe we can get better, and that's why we do this. So I know that wasn't your question, but I don't think any of us are flush with money. And as far as, you know, any donations, they've come from my family and friends, and none of them own any charter schools. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And Mike, same question.
Yeah, and like Jared said, the reports are coming out on Monday, and so it won't be a surprise when you see it that you'll see that I've raised less than $6,000, and so I haven't. I've been putting sweat equity into my campaign. That being said, if you know, Tom Torkelson wants to give me $1 million tomorrow, I'm going to take it, and you can save this as a receipt. That still doesn't mean that I want any outside charter to come into this school district. Okay. You don't necessarily know my character. You might, you know, we can look at Trump and see, like, yeah, there's not a lot of great character in politics these days. That being said, if somebody supports my campaign because they see me talking about things that don't get talked about, I'm going to see that as a compliment. I don't really care who it comes from. And I understand why folks are saying that that's a bad thing. But at the end of the day, you will see on there that I've gotten donations from AISD teachers. I've also gotten donations from the private school people, from charter school people, from people who have wanted to see a change in our public system for so long that they've gone out to these other options. All right, I'm the candidate that really wants to bring them back in. And so if they want to help me do that, I'm going to do it.
Thank you very much. Our next question has to do with communications and public engagement. And Mike, we're going to begin with you, so stay put. Public engagement and communications have long been cited as challenges in AISD, with many families leaving because they're not happy with what the district calls customer service. What specific strategies or even board policies would you support to help restore trust through communications and authentic community engagement with parents in the community? And a second part to that question is, in that vein, would you support the reinstatement of the district ombudsman office, who is directly accessible to the public?
Yeah, so since you said that one, I'm going to start with the second one because it's easy. The answer is yes, that or some type of inspector general office. I think that it's clear that the community is asking for it. And if we're doing our jobs, then we're often supposed to be doing what the community is asking for. And I think that when you have a district or any agency that has over $1 billion budget, it's probably important to have somebody who is there that is not connected with the administration that's supporting that. The first half of your question, I mean, sometimes I like to give administrators the benefit of the doubt in terms of communication, because it is literally the most difficult thing that any government agency does, and it never gets done well. And so we have to figure out ways that we can actually reach people in the community without them having to come to the district. And so, like I mentioned before, I'm a really big proponent of how can we, this is 2020, like we have technology, we have the ability to translate things in a half of a second. We have over 90 languages in this district. We have to remember that we have to reach every single person. And I do believe that the district smartphone app is probably one of the most accessible ways to get real-time information to the community, but it can also go both ways. There's no reason that we can't get feedback on specific agenda items that are going to come up. There's no reason that we can't get polling done on specific decisions the administration wants to make. I mean, it just takes the will.
Thank you very much for that. And next we'll go to Noelita.
Thank you, Roxanne, for this question. So as I touched on earlier, you know, definitely this is an ongoing process of demonstrating that the district and the board is actively and responding in kind, right? Like when we listen, we process, we reflect, like they have to do this ongoing throughout. I think having better relationships with local journalists and reporters, making sure that we have a singular and clear communication, but through a wide range of methods. So not only electronic, I know Mike has mentioned before, you know, really leveraging the mobile app. I think that's a great idea. And even with that, we know that we would be leaving out some families, perhaps grandparents who aren't as comfortable with tech, or maybe families who don't have reliable internet access and they're trying to, you know, finger type on a smartphone. When was the last time that AISD surveyed parents to find out what's your preferred method of communication? And really looking at all the opportunities that our trustees and our admin have for reaching out to campuses, for reaching out to communities. It does require work, but we can do that. And yes, the ombudsman office, I would love to see AISD have an ombudsman office, and at least having one person assigned for staff or internal folks or issues, and then one person assigned for like external or perhaps parent issues, caregiver issues.
Thank you. Jared, same questions?
So as for me, actually, I'm gonna ask if you could repeat the question. That way I can make sure I fully understood it.
Certainly. Public engagement and communications have long been major issues within AISD, with many families leaving for what the district says is poor communities or customer service. What specific strategies or board policies would you support to help restore trust through a communication and authentic engagement process with parents, students, and the community? And added to that, how do you feel about supporting the reinstatement of the Ombudsman Office, an office that would be more accessible to the public?
So as for me, I guess the first initial thing that comes to mind is, of course, when I go to the board meetings and I listen to the parents and the staff members and the students that are speaking, and they only have 1 minute, 60 seconds to speak to us about whatever issue is pressing their minds and their educational experience. 60 seconds. That is the first policy that I think needs to be addressed, because we obviously can't even acknowledge to hear their name along with their message in 60 seconds. It's just too quick. So that's one of the first policies that I think need to be changed. In addition to that, it's also, I guess, like the way that it's structured, if that makes sense. It needs a whole revamping, basically. And I know that the other colleagues that will be joining the board as well can see that, and we can collaboratively come up with something that's way better. But in addition to that, it's also like the application. Like I think that's amazing. I think that the website, the district website, needs to be easily accessible and friendly, so that everyone has access. I know a lot of times we hear these stories where people are having troubles just accessing the most basic information. So just making sure that we have other people from outside looking in at, because if we have fresh sets of eyes on things, you oftentimes get a better perspective. So maybe a web developer from not AISD looking in at it. But that's it, basically.
Thank you, Jared. Leticia, your thoughts on community engagement improvements and the Ombudsman Office?
I'll start with the Ombudsman Office because that is an easy one. It just cannot be only one person. We are a AISD of 80,000 students and 129 schools and a staff of thousands. And so the expectation that we're gonna set up an office with a single employee, we need to put some resources and expectations about how that Ombudsman Office, we want it to look like and we want it to work. I think that can be very, very useful. Certainly that is definitely could be useful. On community engagement, the way the district does it now is terrible, quite honest. When we were working together on our two-year community engagement process during FabPack, we went out to all of these communities. We went to churches, we went to soccer games, we went to grocery stores, and we stood out there and we said, come tell us. We went to where the people were. We didn't expect them to come to a certain set time or rigid place without, a kind of an unfamiliar area. We went to where they were and asked them questions about what they liked and what they didn't like and what could be improved. And that was done person to person, neighbor to neighbor, in a truly authentic way. And that's how you get support. And that's how you find out what people are really thinking, not through surveys, not through emails. That's how I think the district can move and improve in their authentic community engagement process.
Thank you very much. And please stay in place. We're going to begin the next question with you on student enrollment. The school board sets policies, as you know, on boundaries, feeder patterns, transfer policies. It establishes special programs, magnet schools, determines who gets transportation, and other elements that can affect campus enrollment. Regarding all of these that I just named, which issues or which elements might you be willing to change to help balance enrollment across the district? And Leticia, that question is for you.
Sorry if you said it and I missed it.
Oh, sorry.
These enrollment issues, it's not a one thing. It's not just boundaries, just programming, just this neighborhood gentrifying, that neighborhood, this freeway is in the middle. It's all of those things combined that have to be brought to the table to solve this. It's not, if it were easy with one singular thing, it would have been done. But these are harder issues, and it's going to take collaborating with the communities to sort through where to make those adjustments so that we can have better enrollment across the district. We can address the declining enrollment. I mean, all of these pieces fit together. It's not just a boundary issue or just an academic programming issue. Transportation plays a huge issue in so many different pieces. I mean, you hear about transportation when you're talking to families that have special ed students, you know, the magnet students. You've got just the transportation piece is huge. So it's going to take a collective thinking for us to get our arms around how to solve these hard problems.
Okay, and as a follow-up to that, before you go away, you mentioned transportation. Could you kind of prioritize 2 of the 3 of the top elements you think you would tackle if on the board to help balance enrollment across the district?
Academic programming, we need to have a strategic academic plan to see where these programs are. People either love their school, go to their school, or away to their school. They leave for programming, or they leave for extracurricular, or they leave to the Fine Arts Academy. So we need to have a strategic academic plan to see where are these programs across the district, making sure those are equitably dispersed around so that the students that want them, we're giving it to them. So, you know, it's looking at those things and making sure we are doing right and getting those resources to the students that need them.
Okay, great, thank you very much. Mike, same question, your thoughts on balancing enrollment across the district?
Yeah, and assuming that you want those 3 things from me also, I'll just start with that. And so the 3 things that I would address would be special programs, the boundaries, and transportation. And this directly follows my response from earlier about you know, a vision where the district moves towards not having boundaries. And so what you have are intended consequences and always unintended consequences, but the intended consequences of having no boundaries in the district, again, with those guardrails to ensure that segregation does not perpetuate, is you have the ability to have less comprehensive models everywhere. You have the ability to stop forcing many programs in one campus when parents are asking for it. And instead, you're able to ask parents, pretend like anywhere in the district, just tell me what you want academically. Do you want dual language? Do you want IB? Do you, what is the programming that you want? And instead of having to try and cram it in the school closest to their house, we have the ability to then think much more strategically in thematic approaches across the district. And I think that would honestly bring back a lot of students that have left for private schools, for charter schools, homeschooling, because we create an opportunity where schools can actively be redesigned based on what people are asking for. It creates a much more flexible district, in my opinion.
Thank you very much. Noelita, your thoughts?
Yes, ma'am. So I would say the 3 things, first looking at feeder patterns and making sure that our vertical teams have like clean alignments. I know that that's the case for schools that are west of MOPAC, west of Lamar even, but for some of our other schools east of 35, and this is coming directly from families who live this experience. Like it feels like they have a spaghetti bowl of feeder patterns, and that's not right. So I think we need to look at that. And then also transfer policies. I am 100% in favor of having us take a look at how the transfer policy is currently written and where improvements can be made. Last year during closures, there was a parent within our peace community who shared with our entire school the suggestions that she submitted to the board and the district, asking for a more equitable approach to transfers, so that it's not just kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy where you reward folks who already have access to advantages. And then the last thing I would say is, you know, reaching families early, well before enrollment, making sure that word of mouth is positive because it reflects the good work that's happening on those campuses. So having that word of mouth coming from families to other families. And then along with that, teacher retention, you know, engaged employees who are supported, receive training and the resources, they're going to be at their best.
Thank you very much. Jared, we'd like to hear from you on this issue.
Awesome. So as for me, I'll tell you this, many of these issues, they are not new to AISD. These things have been perpetuated for far too long. And so, you know, like I said from the beginning, that's one of the reasons why I'm running. I'm tired of hearing these empty promises. We're going to adjust the boundaries, or we're going to do this, we're going to do that. So for me, I would say, as someone that's boots on the ground action, let's do it. We need to have those tough conversations. So boundaries, you know, making sure, and then also it's about the programs. Program access is a very big one. We know LASA and things like that, and our Keelan Magnet programs, those things, we need equal access to those programs. And that's ultimately what's gonna help us out when it comes to enrollment. Making sure that families have the choice, that they choose what they want in their campus. In addition to that, I mean, there's so many other things. They all kind of go together to do the same thing. So basically, and then additionally to that, I know that our district also needs a very strong marketing campaign so that we can bring our students back. It's about radio advertisements, television advertisements, public transportation advertisements. So on the side of our Capital Metro school buses, let's put some AISD, you know, and show the wonderful programs and things that we have in our district. That's ultimately what's going to help us with our student enrollment. And I'm ready for AISD to make that big investment. And so we need a leader that's going to press for that.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next topic we're going to discuss is special education. AISD has approximately 10,000 students who receive special ed services. What do you consider some of the challenges facing special ed in AISD today? And as a trustee, how would you address them? And Jared, we'd like to start with you.
So that is a great question. So I think I actually am the only candidate that has had that experience inside of the classrooms as a special ed. Excuse me if I don't know your backgrounds, and you probably do, but like I said, I've been a substitute teacher, and a lot of times I've went into those classrooms. So one of the things that I noticed off the top of my head is the amount of support that our special education teachers and staff members are receiving from our central admin. I think that a lot of times, you know, our teachers and our staff inside of the classrooms are not receiving that hands-on, you know, hey, have you tried this, things like that. So I've done a lot of long-term sub positions in our special education classrooms, and I haven't seen that. In addition to that, I would also say it's about making sure that our students have their IEPs updated regularly and that they're monitored and closely updated. And then last but not least, basically making sure that we're not over diagnosing our students, but we're actually making sure that we give them the resources that they need. So those are the main things that I think that our special education department could use. And then last but not least, I know I have about a few more seconds. I know that our special education advisory committee has a lot of members that have been on there for years. I think that our district has several other special education advocates and families that deserve a right to be on the special education advisory committee as well. So that's a very big issue.
Thank you. Leticia?
Thank you, Roxanne. I would lean on the special education parent advocate groups to share with me what they believe is the best path forward, what they are seeing is most beneficial for their students, what is working at one campus and not working at the others. Those are the best people to tell any trustee, any administrator, what is working and what is not working and what is needed. I don't have any firsthand experience in the classroom like Jared does. I do know that whatever we're doing, we need to do it better and we need more resources, and it probably needs to go on a scorecard. I'm not familiar if it currently is on the scorecard, but certainly this is an area where much improvement is needed, and I would lean on those parents that we've already all heard from that certainly have a lot of great things to say and a lot of suggestions to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, so I mean, I can definitely say that as a former teacher who has had special education students in my classroom, I would have been, it would have been very difficult for me if I didn't have a great teaching assistant in that classroom. especially as a first-year teacher. And so we need to be considering how we're supporting our educators and our families and our students to ensure that nobody's getting left behind. Additionally, what we have to do is, as a district, understand that providing special education services is about more than just meeting federal and state legal reporting requirements. And I feel like it's not just Austin, it's almost every district that I've ever worked with. And it's in special education and ELL services, almost every district just meets the bare minimum of legal requirements. And we have to stop doing that. We have to understand that our goal should be talking about how we work towards providing developmentally appropriate education to all of our students. And so, you know, I've heard there's also an equity issue here with special education. I've heard from folks that if you have access to a lawyer, you're going to get much better services more quickly. And if you don't, then you might not get those services. And I think there's now clearly an income equity issue in that for services as well. And so we have to continue talking to people who are the direct stakeholders of this work, which is us also as candidates and board members. But we have to bring the right people to the table at the right time and not afterwards.
Thank you. Noelita, your thoughts?
Roxanne. Yes, so I wanted to mention that the majority of my campaign team happens to be people who identify as parents with special education students or who identify as people with disabilities. That is an incredible, just an incredible privilege on my part to be able to have folks like that working directly with me and helping to inform me and really help me see blind spots. I to add that, you know, my eldest is currently in 4th grade, but when he was in 2nd grade, I saw how our district was pushing families out of general education and out of inclusive environments and really pushing special education families toward segregated SPED units. Incredibly ableist, and it goes against the spirit of the federal laws that we should be following. I also wanted to mention that there is a final report from 2009 that was procured by AISD. In 2009, it has 21 recommendations regarding special education practices. And so I would love to see what happened to those recommendations, or is it sitting on a shelf somewhere? Lastly, I want us to have a budget that reflects our commitment to recruiting and retaining qualified special education educators and moving the special education department closer to the superintendent so that we don't have as many administrative or bureaucratic organizational layers between the superintendent and SPED. And I could probably go on and on. Universal design action. Oh, there you go.
Okay, thank you. And our next question, this may be our last question because I think we're almost running out of time. The next question has to do with standardized testing. What impact does the focus on standardized testing have on students, and what policies and practice would you support to ensure there's meaningful learning opportunities for students and experiences for all students outside the parameters of testing? And Noelita, let's start with you with that question.
Sure thing. Thank you, Roxanne, for that question. Absolutely. So this is another topic where I could talk all day about it. I believe that rather than having the pressure continue to be on the shoulders of campus leaders, teachers, and students and families, where there's a lot of kind of pressure, but then also the accompanied shame of like having this test score almost define one's worth. I want us to get away from that and really look at what are some other ways student progress. There's, informal observation, using self-assessments, also looking at multiple test formats, and really making sure that we're not just using one, like I said, high stakes standardized test to define what we as a district or even students and teachers are accomplishing. And I think part of that requires our school district to stand up to TEA and stand up to the state and say, we are going to reclaim our local control, and we will not bend to the will of these high stakes standardized tests. And other school districts have done that. I want us to be that brave and that courageous to go forward with that.
Thank you. Jared?
You know what? Noelita stole it right out of my mouth. So basically, yes. I mean, we know that COVID-19, I'm going to go with what we're dealing with right now, which is COVID-19 and virtual learning and all of that. We cannot expect our students to be under the pressure, or even our staff members to be put on the pressure to make sure that our students perform high on these high stakes tests. I think we're at that point right now where we should be working, collaborating with other parents and advocates and things like that, so that we can tell TEA that we're done with this. You know, our students are so much more than test scores. Our students deserve to have their entire school year used to assess how they have learned, right? Not just one single day. And so we all know that these tests are systemically, you know, set up against most of our most vulnerable student populations, our SPED, our African-American, our Hispanics, our, you know, just so many, you know, groups of students that are being targeted by these tests. And so I feel like we should have like more of like a portfolio type of thing where our students demonstrate what they have learned the entire year. And so that's what we should be pressing for with our community towards TEA and, you know, education department and things like that. That's what I fully believe. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, we'd like to hear from Leticia.
Thank you, Roxanne. Standardized testing puts a lot of pressure on administrators, teachers, parents, and students. They're stress-filled, and they only measure, that's one data point, snapshot of one day. It does not take into account the whole child, where we focus on the whole child with our academic learning, our SEL. That is, it's not just a data point. And so if we can move away from that thinking, that will serve the district well, that will serve all students well, and teachers. I fully support ensuring any additional learning opportunities so that we can move away from that type of rigid testing process into something else that measures the whole child in an equitable way. So, you know, it's, you know, sorting through how do we do that and how do we make that happen for our school district. And if other districts are successful in pushing back on TEA, well, let's learn from them on how they did that and start to figure out the best step forward for AISD.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mike?
Yes, thanks, Roxanne. I mean, I think it's definitely clear that standardized testing is stressful on students, it's stressful on the system itself, and it's insanely costly. And so, but on the other side, I'm like, and standardized tests also, we've seen, and I think Jared alluded to this a little bit, in that standardized tests have shown to assess socioeconomic status better than anything else. And you know, we don't need a test to assess for socioeconomic status. We need to actually make sure that our students are being supported in a way that when they leave school, they can actually have self-determination towards their own happiness. And that's not necessarily going to four-year college. It could be any number of options. And so what we have to do as a district is we need to redesign for ourselves what it means to hold ourselves accountable. We have to design a local accountability system. And yes, we can push back on TEA, absolutely. But what we have to do more so is create a system that doesn't even give TEA the opportunity to come into Austin in the first place. So, you know, there are state laws about if you have a campus that is an F for 4 or 5 years, the state mandates having to come in and do something. We should never let anything get to that point. We don't want TEA to come in. We need to give them no opportunity to do that in the first place. And so we have to design these systems locally that go way beyond the tests. And we can look longitudinally. Again, we have technology. We should be able to see how students are doing when they leave us as well. Thanks.
Okay. And I've got a follow-up question. And this will be our last question. It sort of touches on the most recent question, but others as well. And I'm going to start with you, Mike, by asking to list like at least 2 data points that you'd like to see on the superintendent's scorecard, the scorecard that the board uses to evaluate the effectiveness of the superintendent. So let's start with you, Mike.
Yeah, I think at the top of my list would be growth in 3rd grade literacy. I mean, to pick 2 is so difficult. I think we've talked about so many like incredibly important topics. But for the second one, I think, you know, outside of measuring growth in third grade literacy, we also have to look at enrollment. And so I would say that on that scorecard should be looking at a trending upward track in enrollment.
Okay, thank you. Leticia, a couple data points you'd like to see on the superintendent's scorecard.
I would like to see academic outcomes for our students of color and our special education students and their service, how we are serving them. I'm not sure what's on the scorecard now, but I would hope that if they're not, those are the two pieces. If I'm only allowed to pick two or prioritize, those are the two that I would prioritize at this time.
Okay, thank you. Jared, same question.
Yes, I think this question is a little too soon, but actually on Monday, I think there is a board retreat, and this is one of the things that will be discussed is the scorecard. And so I think that if I have to do a meeting, I guess, conversation, it's basically the student enrollment, which is leading to our school closures and leading to so many other things that we're facing in AISD. And then in addition to that, basically our academic performance and resources as it revolves around equity. Those are the main things that I want her to be assessed on, I guess. And lastly, I'll say this, we have to hold our superintendent accountable. And I say that for these guys, if they are elected, I say that for myself, and I say that for all of the other candidates that are coming on board. We have to hold her accountable. If she's not suitable for the job, then let's redo that whole process that was rushed through, and let's get somebody that is able to give us those results that we determine are.
Okay, thank you. And Noelita.
Yes, thank you. So I would say 3 things: strategic enrollment plan, closing the academic outcomes. There were measures on the 2016 scorecard, if memory serves, but then they somehow disappeared in 2017. We need to get those puppies right back onto that scorecard and assess whether those are the right metrics, but definitely bringing something like that back. And then also specific metrics with respect to special education. There were recommendations made last year by the Education Coalition, and I'd like for the board to take a look at those and again, hold the superintendent accountable. And I will also throw in that I think we need to have a school board trustee scorecard. I would disaggregate it by trustee, but even as a whole body. So I would love to see that.
Thank you very much. And now, as we wrap up, I'd like to give each of the candidates 30 seconds to make a brief closing statement, starting with you, Noelita.
Thank you all to AISD for All, Roxanne, and all the folks who have made these forums possible. For me, public education is a social justice issue. Effective public schools lead to a skilled workforce, a strong economy, a healthy democracy where we see informed civic engagement. I really want us to move on just talking about disparities and catchphrases of worst first, all, to actually implementing budget policies and practices that strategically aim to close educational opportunity gaps. Oh.
Thank you very much. Moving on to Jared.
Awesome. Well, you know what? I say thank you all for inviting us to be able to participate in this tonight. My name is Jared Breckenridge, and again, I'm running for the at-large position because I am tired of hearing so many candidates say that they're going to do this, do that for our most vulnerable communities. We know that we need change now more than ever. There are very pressing issues that we're facing, such as discipline, such as academic performance, such as our boundaries, all of the issues that we talked about tonight. And I am committed. I have been committed. I've attended every single board meeting, and I'm ready to do this with you. Jared for AISD.com.
Thank you. Leticia?
Thank you, Roxanne, and thank you, AISD for All, for hosting this. Austin is the most innovative, technological, and creative city in the country, and we are proud and celebrate that. And we can work together to make sure AISD is the best school district, public school district in the country. We are a diverse school district. We have big schools, small schools, magnet schools, choice schools, portables, dry portables, and we should celebrate that diversity, pull together, and make sure we are one community. I hope to be your I hope to be your trustee in November 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, your closing statement?
Yeah, thank you, Roxanne. And thank you for setting this up. This has been a great forum. And you know, I've mentioned this a number of times. I'm running to bring my professional experience as an educator to the table. I think it is often missing from most school boards, and it's definitely missing from AISD's school board. You know, it's easy to critique our schools. We do it. We're literally doing it over and over again for the past 3 months. But it's far more challenging to create solutions that address the roots of the problems. And I've spent years designing, implementing, and managing systems in public schools that do just that. Thanks.
Thank you. And on behalf of AISD for All, I'd like to thank all 4 of our candidates. The willingness to serve as a public servant in an unpaid position is certainly admirable, and we thank you so much for your time this evening. We'd also like to thank KUT, who has partnered with us to share our forums, and we encourage all of you to check on our website, aisdforall.org, where you can see this forum and the previous forum. And so again, thanks to everyone, and we wish you a good evening. And to echo what Laura said earlier, everyone who's within listening distance of my voice, learn about the candidates and vote. Thank you.